May 2026. Beijing. The cameras were rolling. Two of the most powerful men on Earth shook hands. The world held its breath. You probably saw the headlines. Big summit, big smiles. Trump and Xi side by side. Looked like something huge just happened. But here's the thing, the handshake? That wasn't the story. What really happened in Beijing was something the headlines missed entirely. See, most people watched this summit and walked away thinking, okay, some deals were made, nothing crazy, and they're not wrong. But they're also not fully right. Because the real question isn't what Trump and Xi agreed on, it's something bigger. What if the most important thing about this summit wasn't what they agreed on, but where they agreed to fight next? Think about that for a second. Not a peace deal, not a grand bargain, but a formal agreement about how to keep fighting. Trump walked away with soybeans. Xi walked away with a stage. And together they built a ring. That's the real story. So let's actually go through what happened. Because once you see it, you can't unsee it. The U.S. China octagon is officially open. First, let's talk about why this summit looked underwhelming. Because honestly, if you read the headlines, it kind of did. Back in 2017, when Trump visited China the first time, companies signed deals worth $250 billion. That's a massive number. This time, the commercial results were, in the words of one former U.S. trade official, and I'm not making this up, way below expectations. Here's a useful way to think about it. Some things got confirmed, some things were just discussed, and in diplomacy, that gap matters a lot. Confirmed. Agricultural purchases. Confirmed 2 new economic boards. Those actually happened. Those are real. Now let's talk about the rest. Boeing, discussed. Rare earths, discussed. Big tariff cuts, still unclear. These are on the table, but not yet in the bag. And here's something interesting. The U.S. side and the Chinese side described the exact same summit in very different ways. Washington talked numbers, soybeans, aircraft, rare earths. Specific, concrete, measurable. Very Trump. You can show it on a campaign poster. Beijing talked philosophy, strategic stability, constructive relationship, manageable differences. Very Xi. Broad, dignified, designed to frame the entire narrative on China's terms. Same summit. 2 completely different victory speeches. And that gap, that asymmetry, tells you almost everything you need to know about this meeting. Okay, so let's start with what Trump actually brought home. And I want you to picture this for a second. Soybeans. Yeah, soybeans. Not exactly the sexiest diplomatic trophy, right? But in American politics, soybeans are not just soybeans, they are votes. They are jobs. They are livelihoods in Iowa, Illinois, Indiana. For millions of American farmers, China was the biggest customer. And then the trade war hit. China stopped buying. U.S. agricultural exports to China dropped 65.7% in 2025. A complete gut punch. So imagine you're a soybean farmer in Illinois. Your biggest buyer just disappeared. That's not just bad economics, that's a nightmare. Now Trump comes back from Beijing with this announcement. China will buy at least $17 billion of U.S. agricultural products every year. 2026, 2027, 2028. 3 years. That's not a small number. That's real money going into real American farms and real American towns. There's a theory in international relations called two-level games. The idea is this. When a leader negotiates internationally, they're actually playing 2 games at once. Game 1, the international table where you negotiate with the other country's leader. Game 2, the domestic table where you negotiate with your voters. Trump wasn't only negotiating with Xi in that room. He was simultaneously negotiating with the American farmer back home. And the soybeans proved it. Does that change how you see this summit? Because I think it should. The headline isn't Beijing. The audience is in Iowa. All right, so Trump got his soybeans. What did Xi Jinping get out of this? Here's where it gets really interesting. Xi's win wasn't in the numbers. You won't find it in any spreadsheet. His trophy was the stage itself, the image, the moment, an American president in Beijing. This hadn't happened in 9 years. For China's domestic audience, that image says everything. America came to us. Scholars who study summits call this foreign policy performance. A summit isn't just negotiation, it's theater. It's a stage production with global consequences. And Xi absolutely understood this. While Trump counted soybeans, Xi was counting something else. Cameras, flags, ceremonies, and what story the world would tell. China's framing for the summit. Constructive strategic stability. 4 words. They sound almost boring, but unpack them and you find an entire worldview. Constructive means cooperation is the main thing. Strategic means this isn't small stuff. Stability means we're not going to blow everything up. Translation, China and America can compete, but let's put the competition inside a box where it can't accidentally become a war. For Xi, that framing, China shaping the rules of engagement between superpowers, is a diplomatic victory. You can't put that in a soybean shipment. So we've got 2 leaders who walked into the same room and walked out with completely different trophies. That's the beauty of this summit. Now let's talk about Boeing, because this is where the summit got visually dramatic, and also where things get a little more complicated. Trump announced it himself on Air Force One, flying home. China agreed to buy 200 Boeing jets. Big, beautiful planes. Major win. And on paper, that sounds massive. Boeing hadn't gotten a significant Chinese order in nearly a decade. The aviation market in China is enormous. But hold on. Boeing itself called this an initial commitment. Not a final order, not a signed contract. A commitment. There's a difference. And 200 planes? Industry insiders say Boeing was originally in negotiations for at least 500 jets. So 200 actually represents a below-target result. Boeing stock actually dropped after the announcement. The market wasn't impressed, because traders know the difference between a commitment and a real order. But here's the deeper issue with Boeing. Why did China stop buying in the first place? It's not just about tariffs. It's about trust. China's airlines need to buy planes. Fine. But what if America slaps export restrictions on the parts and engines later? What happens then? One Chinese aviation analyst put it bluntly. No one wants to buy something without guaranteed after-sales maintenance. Who would dare buy Boeing under those conditions? So the Boeing story isn't really a deal story, it's a trust story. And between America and China right now, trust is in very short supply. Okay, we've talked about soybeans and Boeing. Now let's talk about the thing that barely made the news, but might be the most important one. Rare earths. Have you ever heard of yttrium, scandium, neodymium? These aren't just chemistry words, they are the invisible infrastructure of modern civilization. Electric car motors, missile guidance systems, fighter jet engines, semiconductors, wind turbines. All of them depend on rare earth minerals that China dominates. China refines over 90% of the world's rare earths. That's not a market share, that's a chokehold. And they proved it in April 2025. When Trump hit China with Liberation Day tariffs, China hit back. Not with tariffs, but by cutting off rare earth exports. That's weaponized interdependence. There's a theory for this. Farrell and Newman call it weaponized interdependence. Global trade networks aren't just economic, they're weapons. And China knows this. The White House announced that China agreed to address U.S. concerns about rare earth shortages. Okay, sounds good, but here's the catch. China's own official statement didn't mention rare earths at all, not once. 2 governments, same summit, 2 completely different versions of what was agreed. That gap right there? That's where future conflicts are born. When 2 sides think they agreed but they actually described completely different things. Soybeans are visible. Boeing planes are visible. Rare earths are not. But sometimes the invisible thing is the sharper weapon. Remember that. All right, we've covered soybeans, Boeing, and rare earths. Now I want to tell you about the thing that most media missed, the actual centerpiece. 2 new institutions were created at this summit. The U.S. China Board of Trade and the U.S. China Board of Investment. These sound bureaucratic. They're not. The Board of Trade manages non-sensitive goods between the 2 countries. The Board of Investment handles investment-related disputes. Government to government, official, permanent. Think about what these boards actually are. They're not a resolution. They're not a peace treaty. They are official arenas to officially keep fighting. Before this summit, when the U.S. and China had a trade problem, it escalated fast. Tariffs, retaliation, more tariffs, chaos, no clear process. Now they have a ring. A formal, structured place to argue, to bargain, to threaten, to pause. And then, crucially, to return. A scholar named Kevin Rudd calls this managed strategic competition. The idea is simple. America and China can't be friends, but they can have rules. Rules don't end the competition, but rules can prevent the competition from becoming something catastrophic. That's the entire point of the board structure. This summit did not end the U.S. China fight. It organized it. That's a very different thing. And honestly, between two nuclear powers, it matters. In a world where two superpowers can accidentally stumble into conflict, having an octagon, a formal cage for the fight, might be the real victory. So why didn't they just make a bigger deal? If both sides wanted stability, why not a grand bargain? Here's the uncomfortable answer. Because this isn't a simple trade dispute anymore. This is a full-spectrum competition. Semiconductors, AI, military power, Taiwan, supply chains, energy, everything is connected. America wants China's market, but America also wants to stop China's rise as a tech superpower. Those two things cannot exist in the same deal. China wants American technology and market access, but China refuses to accept American pressure as permanent. Those two things also cannot coexist in one deal. They need each other. They also fear each other. That's not a contradiction, and it's actually the defining feature of great power competition in the 21st century. And that's exactly why a grand bargain was structurally impossible. You can't make a permanent deal with someone when the competition itself is permanent. Think about that for a moment. Would you sign a permanent contract with your biggest competitor? Probably not. Neither would they. So let's bring this all together, because I think by now you're starting to see what this summit actually was. Not a beginning, not an end. Trump walked out of Beijing with a domestic political win. Soybeans for farmers, a Boeing headline, numbers he can put on a poster. Xi walked out with something harder to measure but arguably more valuable. The image of being recognized as America's essential counterpart. Not a rival, a peer. Boeing remains uncertain. Rare earths remain disputed. The trade truce ticks down in a few months. None of the hard problems went away. But both countries now have an official place to handle those problems. An octagon, rules for the ring, a referee's bell, even without a referee. That might sound like a low bar. And maybe it is. But between the U.S. and China, even a low bar consistently cleared is actually progress. Because here's the alternative. No ring, no rules. No formal structures for conflict management. Just two superpowers bumping into each other with no guardrails. That's how wars start. The U.S. and China didn't leave Beijing as friends. They left as two fighters who agreed where the next round would be held. And maybe that's the most honest thing you can say about U.S.-China relations right now. The fight isn't over. It's just more organized. So what do you think? Is a formal managed competition between the world's two superpowers actually a good outcome for the rest of us? That's a wrap for today. The summit that built the ring. Next round, hunt fall 2026 when Xi comes to Washington. Stay tuned.